Before we get into the complicated process of rigging a humanoid character, let's just learn the basics by putting a few bones, an armature, into a simple tube-like object. So I'm here in Blender. I'm going to go ahead and remove my cube, and let's see, I'm going to go into my quad view, Control-Alt-Q, and I'm going to add a mesh UV sphere. I'm going to zoom in on it, and I'm going to go into wireframe mode so that I can select all of the top points. Why don't you take this step with me? Go into Edit. Let's just draw a box around the top points, and I'm going to move those up, up to just kind of create an elongated pill shape. That looks pretty good. Deselect those. Hit the A key to select all and the period key to zoom in on just the things selected. Kind of put those things into focus. And then I'm going to do a few loop cuts just to create some subdivisions on this tube-like object. So I think I made 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 or 6. So separate and segment your tube in this way. That's going to give us some polygons to deform when we bend this shape. And to be honest, doing a few more would probably give us cleaner deformation. So if you really want to, you can add a few more chops there. It's really not going to hurt anything. That'll get our object set up, and next we're going to add some bones. And adding bones is done first by adding an armature object. So we can go into Add menu and go down to Armature. And when we do that, a new armature object is created. And armatures are used to deform things. It's a series of bones and joints and other objects within Blender that will then deform this mesh, allowing us to really bend it, almost like a collection of wires within an action figure. So you can see we have an armature object, an oppose object, but also we have a single bone that starts in our tube. I'm going to Control-Alt-Q, whoops, let's Control-Alt-Q over here to see, sorry, what am I trying to do? Let's just go into our front. There we go. And you can see that I have a single bone created down in the bottom of my tube. Now this bone looks a little bit like a triangle or a long diamond. And we like this shape because if the bone is shaped like a long diamond, it shows the origin point at the larger base of the diamond. Let's zoom in on this guy. So this is the origin joint. And then the diamond shape tapers towards the target of the bone. So just kind of think about this being like the root and this being the target. Now you can change the way that these bones look. So I can go into Armature and then go into Data down here in our Properties panels. And then I can change the display from octahedral, which is the default, and it's the default in most programs. I can change it to a stick. I can change it to a B bone, which is kind of like a block, and then an envelope, which is just kind of more of a rounded octahedral, and a wire, which is as thin as you can possibly get. We'll leave it as octahedrals right now. We may change this in kind of some advanced settings down the road. All right, so we have our first bone. Next, we want to create a series of bones that go up the kind of the column here, so that way we can bend those, almost like the tail of an object or something, a pool noodle, whatever you want to think this is. Let's just go back to our front view. So with my bone selected, we will go into Edit mode. And in Edit mode is where I can create new bones. So I've got my first bone selected here. I'm going to press the E key to extrude another bone. Now I'd like these to be as straight as possible, because if they're all kind of goofed off all like this, it's not going to bend the shape naturally. We want to establish our bones in a way that's like the most default, most neutral pose for our object. So I'm going to press the E key, and I'm going to drag this up, and I'm going to do a little bit of a hotkey here. I'm going to press the Y key. Whoops, not the Y. Let's a Z key rather. I'm so used to Y being on the vertical. But if I press the Z key, it's going to lock that bone to the Z axis, which is up and down in Blender. And that way, it's kind of like holding Shift in Photoshop to kind of lock it to an angle. So I will press the Z key, and then click to commit that. Pressing E again and the Z key again will allow me to draw out another bone. E key, we can think of it as like extrude or extend. Draw out another bone, Z key to lock it into its vertical position, and away we go. Now, if we want to kind of accelerate this, we can, let's hold on, back to the Z key. We can press Shift R and repeat the process. So just remember Shift R for repeat. It's pretty convenient. And that will allow us to just repeat the previous process, and this is useful in a lot of other cases, to create the rest of those bones in a uniform way, all the way up the column here of that pool noodle shape. Now once we've done that, we want to just do kind of some quick testing of this, this chain. Now remember, we're in edit mode, so your first instinct might be to move one of these bones around and just kind of see if it's connected. And you can see that indeed these bones are connected. So if I move one, it's going to keep the chain intact. But if I rotate one, you'll notice that it just rotates it in place and it keeps them connected, but it's not exactly moving them around like, say, like a collection of vertebrae in a snake or something like that would. And that's because we're in edit mode. Right now, we're not actually trying to deform anything. We're just putting the bones wherever we want them to be. So I can move these things, position them wherever. And one quick note while I'm doing that, the scale of your bone is dynamic. It is going to increase based on the distance for these particular octahedrals. So as you move this out, don't be worried that this bone is so large. In fact, it's one of the drawbacks of octahedrals that some designers don't like, is that the size of the bone is changed by distance, not by importance. So don't worry about the size there. But to test our bone rig, we can go into a new menu or a new mode called pose mode. And this is only available when you're on your armature. And that allows us to select these bones and do things like rotate them and see if, yes, indeed, they will bend like we would expect them to. So when in pose mode, you're doing exactly as it says. You're trying to pose your armature, or by another name, your rig. And the armature might be referred to in Blender as the tool, and the rig is kind of the overall collection of items that allow you to pose your character. And we'll get into some more complicated kind of items beyond armatures in just a moment. So that's really the basics of establishing a string of bones and your mesh. But there's one final step. We have to bind these bones to the mesh, to this sphere. Because by default, Blender doesn't know that we want these bones to apply to this mesh. Just because we've placed them within, Blender has no clue that we actually want them to do the job of deforming this tube. So we have to do a parenting process to get that to happen. To pair, to bind, to connect our string of bones to the mesh, we're first going to select the mesh. So we're going to say, I want this, and then to be driven by or to be controlled by that. So I want the sphere or my tube. Control click the armature. I want the tube to be controlled by this armature. And you have to click them in that order, otherwise it's going to think in the opposite direction. And then we can use a hotkey. So I'm going to press Control or Command P, and it's going to give this set parent to option. And we're going to set the parent to this armature deform, and we're going to use automatic weights. Now we'll talk about what weights are in a different video, but when I click with automatic weights, you're going to see this connection, armature ... to sphere. All right. And then if we've done this correctly, we can then go into our pose mode. And once in pose mode, we can select these bones and bend them. And sure enough, our pool noodle bends right along with them, which is great. That's exactly what we want. So now we can bend this and kind of create this inchworm-like look. We can go into our perspective and go into our rendered wireframe, and we've now got the bend of a finger, a pool noodle, inchworm, whatever you want to call it. And then for my purposes, sometimes I will put on an additional modifier. So we might go into our sphere. Let's get on that sphere object, and then we might go to our sphere and then make sure we're in object mode where we can access our modifiers. And then on top of this, we can add a subdivision modifier just to try and smooth this out a little bit. So we're going to do shade smooth, and it looks pretty good, but maybe we want to add modifier, subdivision surface, and then just play around if we want that to happen in front of or after the armature. It looks like after gives it a little bit of a smoother bend. So that's the basics of adding bones. You will be in pose mode to get access to those bones again. Sometimes you want to pop through the wireframe, what have you. And then you'll be in edit mode to mess with your bones. You'll see that snap back to its default. And then, yeah, that's the handful of tasks there. One last thing while I've got you. You may prefer sometimes to be working in your viewport shading versus wireframe to see your bones. And Blender offers a quick way to force your bones into visibility. So if you have your armature selected, you can go down into the object properties, and then under viewport display, you can click in front. And that's just going to force your bones to always be in front. Now keep in mind, you're going to have to be in pose mode to move them and that sort of thing. So there are some artists who prefer not to turn that on because it's just a reminder that when you're in edit mode, you can't see them. But then, you know, when you're in like maybe a wireframe view, that's when you can kind of get in and see those. So it just depends on your preference. I tend to turn it on just because I want to be able to see them in the various views. So armature, object properties, in front if you can't see your bones. And I would say, I guess, happy bending.